CD Projekt Red just dropped a big update on the future of Cyberpunk 2077 and really an insight into what's coming with this next big patch, patch 1.2. And this is actually pretty exciting. What they're doing here is giving us some insights as to some of the changes coming to Cyberpunk with the next big patch. This patch originally was set to come out before the end of February, but with the recent hack that went on, it was changed to come out before the end of March. And now we're getting a first look as to some of the changes coming with this in a really cool way, as they're writing most of this from the perspective of in-universe. A Night City news presenter is actually telling us what kind of changes are coming to Night City. I'm sure a lot of people are going to be wondering, okay, but when is the patch coming out? Technically, they still don't give a release date even here, but I'm going to guess it's going to be Friday, March 26th. CDPR with Cyberpunk has really liked dropping things on Fridays, even just this tweet and this new insight, and considering they only have till the end of March to actually get this patch out, it definitely seems like that's going to be the likely date. Several previous patches also dropped on Fridays, and this is supposed to be the big one, the biggest patch yet, but even further, almost in a different league than some of the other patches we've seen for the game. So the blog post does mention how NCPD Quick Response Team 2 Quick, you heard right, the NCPD Quick Response Team is under fire from concerned Night citizens and corporations alike. The rapid deployment tactics they recently adopted forced mercenaries to think twice before pointing a gun at anyone, but will now be adjusted to give the other side some breathing room. So basically what they're referring to is, if you get wanted in Cyberpunk 2077, the police will spawn literally right behind you, or spawn in a place that they technically shouldn't be able to. But in this new video showing what will come with patch 1.2 to the game, you can see a couple of things. First and foremost, of course, right as you take down some citizens, there isn't a cop 5 feet away from you taking you down in response, but rather what you see here is first, a police recon drone will kind of scout out the area around that reported crime. We can't see this alleyway, but it does seem like that drone still does just magically spawn over there. But it does seem clear, even with 2 stars, that is the only response we get right off the bat. And then basically, after that drone does scout you out and you do fight it, you can see one police officer running towards you from the distance. Now, it seems like he did spawn in this spot, which is significantly further than they do currently spawn, with the overall goal of making this whole police interaction a lot smoother, feel a lot more natural, like the police are scouting you out and then coming to you. To go along with this, they have a few in-universe quotes, which are hilarious. Mike from Kabuki does say, "My team Jake was in a shootout with Tiger Claws the other day when he missed a shot and it hit a pedestrian on the other side of the street. In an instant, the NCPD swarmed up on him and put him down. It's like they appeared out of thin air right behind his back. It's too brutal of a response for a regular accidental murder if you ask me." Militech's PR manager said, "Personal security in Night City has always been our priority. The recent spike in NCPD efficiency might seem like a step towards safety, but it isn't. Upsetting the fragile balance in the security sector might soon result in more people canceling their protection subscriptions and inviting gangs and T to take over the city." And then the actual explanation from the CDPR dev himself, where he does say, "This is an important step in addressing the behavior of the police in our game. It should decrease the problem of NPCs spawning behind players' backs and create an impression that it takes some time for the police to arrive at the crime scene after the crime has been reported. We've also added a recon drone unit to create the feeling of the police assessing the situation." And I think this is overall pretty great. A lot of people didn't even think this is going to get addressed in this update or anytime soon, that the police system would large in part just remain the way it is. And although this is far from a perfect fix, I think the ideal would still be maybe just a couple of police cars coming around the corner at the reported area of the crime, kind of like how some other games handle it. The drone mechanic in particular is a very nice touch, and especially if you're in some denser areas, it looks like the NPCs will spawn far enough away that it may genuinely feel like they are just running to you from around the corner, like they might have just been stationed there. Next up, we hear about how vehicular manslaughter statistics are higher than ever, and how the Night City Council approved a bill forcing vehicle manufacturers to update their steering firmware. And what we could see added in 1.2 is a steering sensitivity slider, as well as an inner and outer dead zone that you can assign to tweak this even a bit further. Something similar already exists in the game for aiming with weapons, and as you can clearly see in the gameplay comparison, what this will do is make it so it'll basically take longer to turn fully depending on how much lower you turn the sensitivity, hopefully making it so you don't just whip around accidentally or spin out all that commonly. Although this isn't the only solution to this, as CDPR also gives a bit of a description as to other changes coming. Analyzing feedback on our driving model suggested a lot of players were having issues with the speed of the steering. Most complaints came from players using keyboards on PC or on platforms with lower frame rates, and centered around how hard it was to keep cars off the sidewalks and such. We had added a steering sensitivity slider to the options menu. This allows the steering speed for all vehicles and all input devices to be slowed down without affecting the maximum turn radius. So in other words, regardless of your steering sensitivity, you can still make a 3-point turn or a U-turn in the exact same amount of space. It's not going to make it so you turn wider now. But even further, when experiencing lower frame rates, our cars were harder to control. We traced this to some code that wasn't handling extreme changes in frame rate properly. The steer speed is now very consistent from 20 to 60 plus FPS. Last, we looked at a bunch of tweaks to individual cars, and some of them that were too twitchy in low frame rates, including the player's Archer Hella. This is definitely one of those ones that's hard to gauge the impact of. If you played Cyberpunk 2077, you probably know the cars sometimes just feel like they're on ice, and this certainly could be a complete top to bottom solution to that, but it's hard to tell. I think this is one of those ones we have to experience for ourselves. For me at least, the gameplay video certainly made it look like it was better, but it's hard to tell how much better. But another pretty nice change coming to vehicles is rock and roll for racers. This is a pretty funny one. Basically, they're adding in a system where, let's say you get your car stuck on an object and simply can't move forward or backward. If you're accelerating and not moving, the game will now detect that and allow you to rock forward and back or left and right to get unstuck. The developer describes how there are cases where our vehicles can get beached or high centered on stuff in Night City. We've now added an unstuck feature that kicks in when you're accelerating and not moving. While holding down the accelerator, you can now rock the vehicle forward or back and rotate it left and right. This is a minor one. I feel like it wasn't a huge issue, but it's another really nice quality of life change on the way to the game. And then lastly, we do have the update to our neuroprocessor drivers or will die. This is not a joke. It's raining men in Night City, and not for the reasons you'd expect. Just over the last month, authorities recorded nearly 4,000 fatal accidents caused by a neuroprocessor glitch, causing users to dodge without intending to. The manufacturer has prepared an update to address the issue. So this honestly is probably the least exciting to me. Basically, what this allows you to do is turn off dodge on double tap. The dev explaining, dodge and double tapping a movement key can be turned off in the control setting. The dodge actions can still be performed by double tapping the crouch action key. It should now be more feasible to move WSAD bindings around the keyboard. There'll still remain a few bindings that need to be addressed, but these should be fixed in upcoming patches. So to me, this is actually probably the worst fix here in that it just feels incomplete. If you don't know, right now in Cyberpunk, you can either dodge by double tapping one of the movement keys, and then you'll dodge in that particular direction, or if you double tap the crouch key, whether it be the toggle or hold to crouch key. Basically, all this is doing is making it so it disables dodging by double tapping one of the keys, so the only way you'll be able to dodge is by double tapping crouch. This very much so feels like a band-aid fix. I think what the vast majority of people want is just a dedicated dodge key. Obviously, it's an improvement being able to turn this off, giving us one extra option as far as that functionality, but again, there is definitely a higher ceiling here. And based off that wording at the end of the final developer quote, there still remain a few bindings that need to be addressed, but these should be fixed in upcoming patches. It makes me feel like things like slow driving or even a dedicated walk key are still a ways away. We could see some of them in this update, and it is odd because modders on PC have already added in a ton of that functionality even just a week after the game came out. So why it's taking so long for CDPR, I don't know. But overall, when it comes to this development insight, I love this. I think this is incredible. I think it's incredibly well done. Some of the changes are leaving a bit to be desired, but this is also one of those things that gets me excited nonetheless. If you look at Cyberpunk right now, in particular on consoles, what we need is performance improvements and bug fixes. I think the vast majority of this update is going to be addressing bugs and console performance and somewhat PC performance. The fact that we are starting to get some of these other tweaks or kind of features to the game is good. Hopefully we're not looking at a comprehensive list with these 4, but again, considering the focus of this update likely isn't on some of these feature additions, it is nice to see that they are getting added at all. Plus, just the style of writing this from an in-universe perspective is really cool. I'm very happy to see that added. I think it just makes it a lot more fun to read what otherwise could be kind of mundane. The more cynical side of me does wonder if they're showing off some of these new feature additions because they couldn't get performance to look that much better. Like, it seems like a super easy video to post up that will get a lot of attention is a comparison on the current build of the game versus this 1.2 patch of the FPS on something like a base PS4. We could just clearly show how much better that FPS is, and is there a reason they didn't showcase that here? That could just be looking too deeply into it, but it is something that definitely crossed my mind. Although immediately the response to this online has been mostly positive, there definitely are some negative reactions or people saying, well, that's it. And as I mentioned before, I think there is going to be a long list of bug fixes, but I also think users overall just need to temper their expectations expectations. If you're hoping patch 1.2 was going to add in a plethora of new features that get you interested in the game again, I just don't think that's this update. Technically, we don't know that for a fact, but just look at what's going on. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be fixed before things can be added. I have to imagine all of the DLC and expansions have been pushed back 3 months or so, if not longer, depending on when things actually are fixed. If you already beat the game, I can't imagine many of these updates will have you replaying it anytime soon. That may be a few months down the line still, or even a year down the line still, which to me is largely fine. I expect some of the major expansions will be coming in the first half of 2022, and until then, I'll check out some of the major mods, I'll try out some of the free DLCs and these updates, but otherwise I'm not in a rush to replay Cyberpunk right now. There are a lot of other great games to experience. I figure for the foreseeable future, it's going to be mostly fixes for this game. Either way, I hope we see more of these in the future. Although this patch is very much so slated to be the biggest one yet, you have to imagine over the next couple of months, we'll see a few more meaty patches fixing things of the game, and hopefully starting to add some of those much requested and really needed features. Players have been leaving this game pretty readily. Right now on Xbox, Cyberpunk has dropped to the 39th most played game on the system, under the likes of Battlefield 5, Fallout 4, Fallout 76, and Skyrim. And on Steam, the same thing is true. For the month of February, the average player count was around 25,000 players, but more recently it's averaging about 15,000 players. So it'll be definitely interesting to see what comes next with this game and the impact this patch will have. From a financial perspective, the stock of CD Projekt has definitely not recovered yet. The game still isn't available on the PlayStation Store, but big news should be coming. We of course are getting this patch at some point in the next 10 days or so. I think next Friday is the likely date, but even beyond that, the year-end earnings call for CD Projekt is coming. These almost always have a Q&A with investors, and a lot of times this is where they'll answer questions as far as what's coming next, the roadmap for the future, and even things like DLC, multiplayer, etc. That was supposed to happen at the end of March, but is now coming in about a month on the 19th of April. But again, that should be another huge info dump and a lot of details about what's coming next. So overall, I'm hopeful for the future. This is definitely a great step in the right direction, and hopefully this patch does end up delivering. Hopefully we hit the low point with Cyberpunk 2077, and from here on out, it's just going to be another one of those recovery plans or comeback stories like we've started to see with some of these other games. With that said, as always again, I thank you all for watching. I hope you found this video informative, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.